Hello, and welcome to another edition of our Town Administrator Update, our opportunity to talk to Town Administrator Paul Sagarino about, the latest things happening in town government and over there at Town Hall. Paul, thanks for taking some time and joining us once again this month.
Thank you for having me, Rich. It's always a pleasure.
So let's get right into it. The last couple meetings, there's been some quite lengthy discussions about a proposed small cell facility on Mall Road. A lot of questions being asked. I know there's going to be a special meeting next month. So kind of where are we in as far as this issue goes?
I would say, Rich, we're fully in the middle of this issue right now. Just to sort of put things in perspective, small cell is sort of the new cellular company's way of sort of filling gaps in their system, capacity issues. AT&T has identified a capacity issue here in Burlington, down near Leahy in the mall. And, several years ago, the FCC made some rulings and regulations which sort of tried to prevent the barriers for these facilities to be built in city and town right-of-ways. Quite frankly, there's a lot of disagreement over sort of whether these installations are healthy or not. That is not something that the Board of Selectmen is allowed to consider in this application. We have heard from quite several residents that do have concerns about the safety of these things. But that's not up for discussion here. So
Right.
the federal government put in regulations which are very strict and allow the town very little flexibility in terms of whether or not we allow these installations in our right of way. So they have a lot of flexibility to go on poles, telephone poles, or to be put anywhere in the town roadways. And it's really difficult for the board, as we talked about before we got on here. Hundreds and hundreds of pages of very technical documents. And furthermore, the way this technology works, it's likely that we will have many more installations brought forward. So it's very important also from an aesthetics standpoint that we want to make sure that these things are at least somewhat attractive in our landscape, because they could be, somewhat of every couple hundred feet when a system is fully built out in the future. So it's our first shot at it. I think everybody's given a fair effort to try to do this thing properly under the federal guidelines. And I will admit it's a real tricky one for the town, and we're hopeful that whatever conclusion the board comes to on this one, that we'll at least be better prepared for the next one that comes in.
Yeah, this one could kind of sort of set the stage, the precedent for, future discussions, future decisions that have to be made.
Absolutely. And again, we have very little wiggle room under the federal guidelines for this. And again, on the other side of things, I think most residents would agree, we want good cell service here in town. We don't want to be the town with lousy cell service. We have a large business community that relies on cell phones, data, and all these things need to be taken into consideration, as we consider where we'll allow these installations in town.
Right. Switching gears a little bit, we're now in March. May is coming pretty quick. A lot of decisions have to be made before town meeting votes on the budget. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about fiscal year 22 and, lack of local income because of the, pandemic and the shutdown. How are those sort of, budget decisions working out? The department heads coming, rising to the occasion and trying to keep expenses down as much as possible?
Absolutely, Rich. As you know, the hardest part about setting next year's budget is the big guideline discussion that we have. We had in January, a little bit later than usual this year, so we could have some more time to, check on the numbers. But once we are able to agree on guidelines, that process is done with input from Ways and Means, School Committee, the Board of Selectmen, other elected bodies in town. Once we agree on a guideline, everybody is fully committed to meeting that guideline. And I'm happy to say that we're on course to meet that guideline right now. The Ways and Means Committee works very hard at this, and we've had oodles of meetings with them, both subcommittees and in a full committee. They go through the budgets line by line. And of course, a lot of the work is already done. We have great departments and department heads that sort of understand the constraints that we're working under, and they work really hard to try to bring their budget in to where we need it to be in order to have a balanced budget. So grateful to everybody in the process. It's kind of, as they say, kind of like making a sausage a little bit, but through the efforts of and all the hard work of everybody, it's actually gone very smoothly, and we're on target to meet the projections that we set in January.
And now, is that going to include using, some of this town savings? Is that still part of the discussion? I remember there was a meeting where that was sort of a big topic of conversation.
Yes, as you know, part of our strategy last year was to hold back on spending what we call our reserves. So we held back on investing in our capital plan, which is the improvements to buildings, vehicles, sidewalks, roads, and things of that nature. But we wanted to make sure we had enough cash available to address any further emergencies. We feel pretty confident that things have stabilized. So this budget does not include the use of any of those reserves for the operating budget. We will be having a discussion with the Ways and Means Committee. We will be using some of the reserves to get the capital plan back on track and start investing in the town again. Smaller than what we're accustomed to, sort of work our way back into it, with a focus on sort of items that are emergency in nature, high priority for either safety or legal reasons. So those are the items that are going to be brought forward. And again, there's plenty of time for a further discussion in terms of how we may utilize those reserves as we move through the budget process for a variety of different ways to either offset the burden on the residents. We may come across programs or services that the residents determine they do not want to lose and would like to use reserves to maintain those. Those discussions will be ongoing, and probably the biggest topic of conversation is sort of the president's recent announcement of the stimulus plan. There are funds in there for all the cities and towns. What we don't know right now is what are the strings attached to those funds. What are we able to use them for? So we do anticipate that as we learn more about that this is going to be similar to last year, where we're going to set a budget in May, hopefully at town meeting, and with the anticipation that we may be back in September to make further adjustments to it if things are going more poorly than we anticipate, or if things improve also, to try to layer back in any of what was lost during the sort of the pandemic. So it's going to be another unique budget situation, very fluid, as opposed to, hey, this is what we're going to, and we typically pass the budget in May, and that's the budget. But I think similar to last year, we're going to need to be open and flexible to any good or bad news which could come our way over the summer.
Right. Yes, I remember. Yeah, there was the situation of just making decisions when you have as much knowledge and information as possible.
Yeah, and typically for us, Rich, every month that goes by, we get a little bit more information on the local economy. We're able to check to see how the meals tax are doing, whether building permit numbers are improving, things of that nature, that are really indicators to us in terms of how the local economy here is doing. And that's a very, it's a good portion of how we fund our budget. So it's a very key indicator for us.
Yeah. So another thing, kind of a big change in town is Chief Michael Kent from the Burlington Police Department has alerted everybody that he is going to retire at the end of June. And you this week appointed Deputy Chief Brown. So just talk about that change. Your thoughts on Chief Kent retiring and your thoughts on the once and future chief coming in.
We're very grateful that Chief Kent afforded us the opportunity to plan for his departure. Since we've known him, he's always indicated that he's one of those guys that he's going to give his announcement that he's retiring and say goodbye to everybody and leave that day. So due to his generosity in providing us with a good notice, we were able to do some planning here. And Chief Kent makes us smile every day. So he is truly going to be missed. hopefully there's going to be plenty of time to sort of walk through all of his accomplishments as a chief. I can tell you, the department is just one of the finest departments in the state, and we owe him a great debt of gratitude for what he's done in that department. And several years ago, the town created the position of deputy chief as a position in training for a future chief. And I'm really happy to say that it really worked really well. We have so many talented officers in our department. They're well trained, they're educated, they've attended many academies, and they've really put forward a lot of professional development over there and training to try to train our next group of leaders in the department. And, with Deputy Chief Brown, we have a man here. He could be a police chief in any department in the state. I can tell you that right now. And we're so grateful to have had him in waiting. He has had an opportunity to handle the day-to-day in the department for several years now for the chief. And I couldn't be happier to appoint Tom Brown. His dedication and the work that he's put in to put himself in this position is unbelievable. And again, I talk to some managers in other communities, and they'll say, I don't know what to do. My chief's retiring. We have nobody capable of replacing the chief here. And I'm confident to say that even after Deputy Chief Brown, we have plenty of officers that, if they're not in a position to be chiefs now, they will be shortly, just due to the culture and the emphasis on training and professionalism, that Chief Kent put in place when he came to town, over 10 years ago now. So it's really a credit to him. We have an outstanding department over there, cutting edge of everything.
Yeah. I mean, just when you were going over some of his, credentials at the meeting, it was quite impressive.
Yeah, he's quite a guy. And again, he's been training for this opportunity, and, nobody works harder than Deputy Chief Brown. He's amazing. And we're really, I consider us very lucky to, we've had to replace some key positions over the past year, building inspector for one of them, treasurer collector as another. And, it was nice to have one where we already had who we needed right here in the department to make it a little bit easier. So I'm very thankful for that.
Right. And with the same situation that we had with the fire department, Mike Patterson being able to just kind of step right into the position. So
absolutely. Absolutely.
It's good when you hire good people.
And again, a lot of the departments are too small to have true future department heads in waiting, but police and fire in particular are large enough that we're able to provide that, where we had the opportunity to, sort of develop the talent internally. So we're very grateful for that.
Right. Just a couple quick things. Just to let people know, there is starting the even odd day watering is back until the MWRA project is completely full in the next couple of years. How are things going on that front?
Rich, we know that the residents are dying to get away from these restrictions, but the process to get into the MWRA was long before we even started. So we were told that we made it through the process in light speed, which was still extremely slow. So we are a member of the MWRA. Unfortunately, we've only created the phase 1 emergency pipe, which is a connection to Lexington that pretty much allows us to replace the gallons per day, 1 million gallons per day that we had lost from shutting down the wells at the Vine Brooks. So the real relief to the town will be in approximately 2 years when we build the big pipe from Burlington to almost the Arlington-Lexington line. And that pipe will be sufficient to handle all the town's water needs into the future. But again, we're going to have well, hopefully it won't be as strict and rigid as it has been the past couple of years. I think a lot of people can deal with odd even. It's when we have to completely get rid of the watering that we really inconvenience the residents here. So, no one wants that pipe constructed more than, myself and the Board of Selectmen and John Sanchez, because we know how long the town's been sort of dealing with this water shortage, and it'll be just great to have it resolved and just have a plentiful supply of water.
Yes. And last thing, recently the board voted on some just kind of like slight changes to the policy regarding the cemeteries, just to sort of, I think, with the idea of giving a little bit more flexibility to families to sort of decorate their loved ones' plots. What's sort of like just the basic details on that?
Well, what we deal with, Rich, over at the cemetery, we have dedicated employees over there. They pretty much treat every grave as if it's one of their loved ones in there. But like everything in life, people grieve differently. So we have folks that are in the cemetery that wish that it was nothing but a patch of green, and then we have some other folks that like to do fairly elaborate displays. And what we're trying to do is try to strike the balance there between the existing policies and regulations. Sometimes some of these displays, sometimes they just they become old, or plants die and things of that nature, and it detracts from the overall look of the cemetery. So we're really trying to strike a balance here between those that would prefer just a green grass cemetery, and those that would prefer to honor their loved ones in different ways, whether with little statues, little plants, and things of that nature. And again, it's very difficult for the employees over there as they're trying to maintain the cemetery and follow the policies. If items get taken down, sometimes families get upset, and we're just trying to avoid that as much as possible. Try to give some flexibility for people to grieve in different ways, but also, sort of stick to the original policy in terms of, how folks want the cemetery to look in the long run. So a lot of it has to do with the staff being able to clean up as of particular dates and do their annual cleanups without the fear of, disrupting somebody's display.
Right.
And again, that's the conundrum that they're constantly in. Everybody, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and everybody grieves a little differently. So, you have people coming in saying, "Oh, that looks terrible over there," and someone else comes in and says, "Wow, I would love to have that kind of display for my loved one." So everybody views it a little differently, and it's very difficult on the staff to try to determine, how to draw the line. In particular, when we're in a cemetery, people are grieving. They're grieving loved ones there, so it's very difficult trying to streamline it for everybody involved.
Right. It's obviously a sensitive issue. So, but from the discussion that they had at the selectmen meeting, it seems like everybody's trying to make it work for everyone.
Yep.
Well, I think that should probably do it for this month. I once again appreciate you taking some time, checking in, and then we look forward to talking with you again in April.
Thank you for having me, Rich. It's always a pleasure to be on this show with you.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Thank you.